Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Land of 10 Facebook Live session. I'm Scott Dochterman, joined by Bobby Gesse.
Hey, everybody.
And we just got out of Iowa's media session with Kirk Ferentz and players, and they're facing the indestructible Buckeyes this week, which is kind of the Darth Vader and Death Star of the Big Ten, and it certainly has been for Iowa over the years. So I guess, Bobby, what's something that we learned today?
Biggest breaking news coming out of today is that Kirk Ferentz does not have a Sports Illustrated subscription anymore. It's not just millennials killing the print. It is the head coach of the Iowa football team as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know he still has newspaper subscriptions, and he reads them on Wednesday nights usually, probably about the time he does his radio show at, I think it used to be Applebee's, but now it's Carlos O'Kelly's again. So I'm sure he loves that. But from the players, you had an interesting story and an interesting exchange.
If we want to get serious and not disperse with the jokes for a little bit. The players apparently dined on some hog after the Minnesota victory. This was Sunday. The game was Saturday, but they had team meal on Sunday, and the catering that came in delivered them a pig. And it's apparently not the first time it happened. They did this last year because Nate Stanley said he wasn't surprised by the decision to have some pig at all, that he kind of thought it would be the case because it's what they had last year. I think it's kind of a nice little neat, interesting kind of tradition. You can't get the live pig like Bo Bauer wants because PETA will be all over everything. Right. But I think eating the pig for the game after, Minnesota, where you win the Floyd of Rosedale trophy, pretty interesting. Apparently it was kind of served like brisket, and most of the players said they put I talked about 4 or 5 of them, put barbecue sauce on it. So apparently that's how it went. Got good reviews, 5-star reviews that it was good. So apparently I think that has to become on the menu, not just for the team, but for any fans after the Minnesota win. Serve yourself up some pig. Donors
got a ham too as well before the game in the press area.
That's just good. I like it. That's funny. Yeah. That's having fun with it.
Exactly. Minnesota people are the same way. They'll say, I had bacon every single morning this week, in anticipation for this game. That's what makes it especially unique. And I thought one thing that's fascinating, I've seen some of the telegrams from 1935, and after they won the pig, there was a ton of telegrams to the governor of Minnesota saying, hey, you need to slaughter this and give it to him for a hog roast. And again, you just can't imagine that would be the case today.
Yeah, you can't do some of that stuff today, but I think having some sort of pig for it is working very well. So to switch gears, get us back towards number 3, the Ohio State Buckeyes. As always, any comments you have, questions for us about the game, about Iowa football, basketball, anything, feel free to drop them in. We've got a couple coming in. Our first from Rob. He's seen nothing since the Penn State game that makes me think they can hang with Ohio State. I think that's the consensus probably, is this Ohio State team, since that loss to Oklahoma, is playing as good as anyone in the country, arguably. And yes, that includes Alabama. I know some advanced stat metrics. Bill Connolly's S&P Plus has them actually the number 1 team in the country over them, even with the loss. This is a juggernaut. They're rolling. The defensive line is amazing. Ferentz said today it's the best he's ever seen. That defensive line ate up Saquon Barkley in that running game. J.T. Barrett's playing as good as anybody in the country, and he kind of go down the line with every position group they have. And it's just, they're playing like 5-star talent. It's really impressive what they've done these last several weeks since that Oklahoma loss.
It is. And this is always the juggernaut of the Big Ten. It's the flagship football program, and it has been forever, since the days of Woody Hayes. It's the one that consistently wins national titles and puts forth, tons of people in the NFL. And a lot of this, though, is, are we building them up too big? Are they still just a team? After all, Iowa State went on the road and beat Oklahoma.
Oklahoma beat them.
Yeah. And Oklahoma beat Ohio State decisively. It was 31-16. It wasn't really close. And then, you call back to those days, Penn State earlier this year, or Michigan last year. Michigan's defense was incredible last year, and Iowa was able to move it just enough. Now, can they do that against the Buckeyes? What quarterback's a little bit better?
2 parts to that, though. Michigan offense is nowhere near as good as the Ohio State one is, too. Moving the ball is one thing, but slowing them down enough is another conversation itself. And they're both equally hard to do against this team. So, it's going to be a tough test. You'll need kind of the Penn State game that happened, I think, from the defense, however, 6 weeks ago, whatever that was, with the exception of the final drive, and combine that with the Michigan offensive performance where Wadley has a big game, you have some big offensive passes. You'll need a little bit more than that because I don't think 14 points or whatever is going to win this game. But I think you're going to have to combine those two games for them to have a shot in the fourth quarter here.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. We had Brett has a question.
Yeah.
Do you think Iowa will be able to move the ball on offense? Yeah, but I think it's going to have to be chunks rather than 3 yards in a cloud of mud or rubber filament now that it's a turf field. But I think you've got a story about that, about the long passes. Iowa is getting better at that. And you look at last week with Emir Smith-Marset and the ball bouncing off his face mask. That's just ridiculous. You got to make that catch.
But that play was there, though.
It was there.
Don't overlook that from it.
They were at the 7. That was at midfield. Probably gets maybe another 10 yards after the catch. And, so you have a 50, 60-yard pass. And a lot of the deeper routes, I've come to blame a little bit more on the wide receiver than the quarterback. I think the quarterback is overthrown some, no doubt about it. But then there are some where they're not running full and complete routes, and then they're getting them overthrown. So I think they've got a shot at doing a few. You're not going to hit them all. You can try 8 a quarter or 8 a game.
Go 8 a quarter. I like it.
That'd be great. And they might hit 2 or 3. That still may not be enough, but it could help allow the running game to open up.
Yeah, I'm going to have a story up later today. From the offensive point of view, I agree with Scott. The deep pass, it's big passing plays will do it, but most likely it's going to come from the deep pass because it's going to be hard on this defense to turn a 7-yard pass into a 35-yard pass with the athletes they have, how good they are, the sound tackling all the way across the board. So you're looking at the Noah Fant touchdown. You're looking at the Matt Vandenberg catch against Northwestern, everything like that you've seen this year. That's how they move the ball. Ohio State, we said earlier, Penn State and Saquon Barkley, the guy who might win the Heisman, couldn't run on him. An Iowa team that's had struggles running the ball and is inconsistent there is going to run the ball after what you saw with Penn State couldn't do. I have a hard time seeing that. It might happen, but I don't think you can bank on that. And I think the passing game is something this team's done really well, especially the deep pass. And they've gotten better as the season's gone on. Nate's gotten a little bit more air on those balls the last couple of weeks. And that's allowed him to complete a little bit more and get them closer to where it's not just a pass that's overthrown by 7 yards. When it's dropped, it's just over somebody's arms, or it's like the Emir Smith-Marset play. I don't want to bring that up too much, but where it's there and it's just, okay, it was a drop, as opposed to there's no way anybody's catching this ball, whether the guy didn't run hard enough or it was overthrown by a mile. And the easiest way to score is you gain yardage in big chunks. If you're Iowa, I think that's the only way you're going to be able to move the ball in this Ohio State team. The 3 yards in a cloud of dust that Scott brought up isn't going to happen here with that rush defense. And so get big plays in the passing game. And that's how Iowa has scored recently on touchdowns. I wrote earlier this week they need more than just one big play to get them into an end zone. It's been like one big play a half has resulted into a touchdown the last 2 weeks. They need more than that, but the way for them to get down the field in chunks, in big yardage, is that big passing play. And all of a sudden you get 1 or 2 of those, and those become touchdowns or drives that involve touchdowns. That can change the momentum of the game, and all of a sudden Iowa can find itself in a close game in the fourth quarter, which is what they want. Kirk Ferentz said today, Iowa needs to be its best and play to kind of its best strengths to have a shot at this game. And I think on offense, that means taking shots downfield. And Brian likes doing it. He said during the bye week, they're averaging 5 or 6 designed calls downfield the game. Now, you may take a shot downfield and a play breaks down, and that might up that number, but they're making a point to do more than one of those a quarter, which is, a pretty good number for, Iowa historically, what they've done in the Ferentz era.
I think what really has hurt this team a little bit more than I think we've said is, now, but since Boone Myers is out after ankle surgery and Ike Bucker's out for the season with Achilles surgery, is they could have been able to go slam ball with those two being healthy.
Yes. They
could have lined it up and just said, we're going to go meat grinder. And they did that 4 years ago against, and of course they had Sheriff, who's better than everybody, but, they went, they decided we're going 3 tight ends. And we're going to go right down the field. And they did. And it really took Ohio State up until about the fourth quarter before they could catch up physically. Iowa just beat the hell out of them. And the problem is Iowa doesn't have that capability now. Now Alaric Jackson and Tristan Wirfs will next year after that. But right now it's just not quite there yet to go slam ball. Yep. Because if they were able to do that and throw in, some sort of, passing game off of that, I think they'd have a shot. But I just don't know that they can stand up physically wise. I see Akron Wadley and James Butler combining for like 40 yards rushing, and I think it might be a tough day.
It will be. Derek wants to know what's up with Brandon Snyder. Still not playing. Farron said you won't see him this week. Didn't give a timetable on when you might. Now we're getting down to the final few games. I think you'll see him before the end of the season, but this won't be the game, and that hurts because they're facing the best quarterback in the Big Ten. JT Barrett, since they lost to Oklahoma, has been, arguably the best quarterback in the nation. Mm-hmm. In the last 6 games since that loss, he's completed 75% of his passes, thrown for more than 1,600 yards, and thrown 22 touchdowns and no interceptions. I mean, he was the offense in that fourth quarter for that comeback against Penn State. Completed all 13 passes. I think it was 170 passing yards. Might be off on that, but he threw for 3 touchdowns. They needed to go win that game in the fourth quarter. Yeah, they had the block punt, and the defense did great stuff, but the offense had to score points. And to do it, they said, JT, go do it, and it was passing plays. They didn't go run the ball. They said, you're a senior quarterback, you're the playmaker. Go make it happen, and he did. He's
been great his whole career.
Yeah.
Let's see. So John says get a new OC. That's not going to happen. But, one thing I will say, though, is I went through the drives. I know Bobby did his film review, and I encourage you to go read it. I went through 8 different series. It was killed by some stupid play. It was a hold. It was a drop pass on 3rd and 8, and it was an 11-yard gain. It was a fumble. Now, I don't really blame James Butler for his fumble because he had 4 guys holding him up while he was getting stripped. He was trying to make it to the ground, and he couldn't quite get there. But all the other ones, they just something, a holding call. They had a 15-yard gain. Nope, back 10. It really, stopped their momentum. I think they had a chance to have a breakout game offensively, and I still think they're making strides. So, but they have to eliminate that. And this week they have no margin for it. Minnesota, okay. Purdue, Illinois, sure, but not Ohio State. You got to hit them all.
Yeah, one thing off that film room that Scott mentioned is I went back and looked back as why Iowa had success on that first couple of drives, and then it disappeared. And it was the play action, especially on that first drive. That was all their yardage, and they didn't go back to it again really in the first half. And then lo and behold, they go back to it in the second half on that first drive they have on the Noah Fant touchdown. And the majority of their passing yards, it was like 100-something of the 190 came off of play action. So if I'm Iowa State, throw that into that deep pass conversation. Go back to the play action. Don't forget about it. And not all those play action passes were shots down the field. I mean, the T.J. Hawkinson one that went for like 22 yards was a well-designed play that the defense just bit on the run, and because there was no defenders there, it went for 20-plus yards. It should have been probably like a 5 or 7 yard play. Right. I would have loved that to start off the game, but because of how the defense responded, they got more from it. And so if I'm Iowa, that's something else too, is, deep passing, play action. Don't forget about that this week because I think that's the way you can't really attack Ohio State because they're so good, but that's your best way to have potential success, I think, in this game.
Right. Bill asked about Ike Bucker. No,
he's out.
He's out. Hopefully he can make it back to the Combine next year. I think he's got a shot at getting drafted late based on his previous playing abilities, and if he can be back to 100%, I think he will. Brandon brings up the defense has the ability to keep Iowa in the game. I agree with that. I actually do, but you know what I think it has to be is Iowa has to make sure it has an offensive counter for that. It can't force a 3-and-out, Iowa gets the ball and goes 3-and-out itself. It just has – because Ohio State's too good. They're going to score points, and they are. So you have to take advantage of every 3-and-out by being able to push the ball, possibly get a field goal, possibly score a touchdown. I know that sounds simplistic, but they can't just match 3-and-outs with Ohio State because Ohio State's too explosive and they'll score.
Yeah, eventually they will. One other thing on the defense, I think Iowa fans should be confident that the defense isn't going to show up and get knocked out in the first round if this was a boxing match. I think the Penn State game showed you that much, so you should be able to think like that. One thing was Urban Meyer said at his press conference yesterday, he either called Iowa the best defensive line he's seen or one of the best. The phrasing I don't remember, but the thing that stuck with me was Urban Meyer walked away really impressed with the Iowa defensive line, which is saying something from the guy who's team probably has, if not the best offense or defensive line in the country, one of the top 3 at a minimum. I mean, the stuff they do is really, really amazing. They move guys all over the place. They just kind of constantly attack. They have great athletes. Defensive line is hard for most programs to find like 4 guys to start with. And Ohio State can go like 10 deep with guys that are just amazing and unique athletes and guys no one else has. If I'm Iowa, that really concerns me almost more than JT Barrett is that defensive line can shut down an offense. And they kind of showed it in that second half last week.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa has struggled over time of getting true defensive linemen to play defensive line. And they are better now than they were even a couple of years ago. I mean, you look at a guy like a Nate Budgeta, he's kind of a, 240-pound guy who's just really a tough, hard-nosed kid. But, now you've got an Epineza. Anthony Nelson in Big Ten action has the most sacks. I mean, I think he has 4 in Big Ten play, 6 overall.
Yeah.
I love that combination, by the way. I think they're going to be tremendous, Epineza and Nelson. And then Matt Nelson's playing better. Cedric Lattimore had his best game as a Hawkeye the other day. I mean, I talked to him after the game. There was one burst where he had, and it was an incomplete pass, so it's a nothing play. He split a double team. Both of them held him, and he still almost got to the quarterback. I think he'll be a beast there. And then, of course, if the guy from Iowa Western makes his way to Iowa, he'll be in the rotation next year.
Yeah, and just one other point on I'm just going to ignore the whole Nixon thing until someone asks him a question, because that's like a 3-hour conversation that we're going to have at some point. But no, watching Lattimore on replaying the film, that play you brought up was very Jaleel Johnson kind of esque with his ability to disrupt plays, and I think he's showing flashes of it now. And it's the same kind of thing with Anthony Nelson and AJ Epineza. What you're seeing now, especially with AJ, is just kind of the beginning of it all. There's another level or two they can go to with their play, and you're just kind of seeing what they can do basically on pure athleticism for the most part. And when they learn defense more, some of their technique and fundamentals with everything that comes with it, they're really good now, really intriguing now, but where they'll be next year, I think is going to be the really interesting thing, because they have a potential to be really, really, really good. And that's not saying they're bad now, but there's a whole other spot they can go here.
We don't want to talk too much about next year because we have like all off season to do that. But
and a big game within 5 days away.
Yeah, exactly. But you do think about that defensive line. If Davion Nixon makes it here to Iowa, and you're going to lose Nathan Budgeta, but you're also going to have Cedric Lattimore and Matt Nelson probably as your starters. You'll probably have Brady Reef and Davion Nixon as your rotational guys. Then you still have your outside, 3 coming back. Epineza, Anthony Nelson. Parker Gesse will be a senior. And then, there's some good younger ones, too, that don't get to play a whole lot, like Chauncey Golston and Brandon Simon, and I could see them getting some action, too. So the defensive line is in a better spot than it's been at any time since 2010, and it's pretty obvious to me that they finally hit the right note there.
And that's one of the 3 position groups you want to be solid at: quarterback, O-line, and D-line. And that's just not an Iowa thing. That's anybody across the country. If you're in a really great spot there, your team's probably going to have a good run for a couple of years, assuming everybody's not a senior in the year. So what do you have? Steven loves the new uniforms. I like them too. I think they're really, really cool. They're really unique. They're really nice. It's not one of those ones like the Ohio State ones that they were last week. Just why were they in all gray, and it looked really weird, and you couldn't They had no reason to let you know it was Ohio State. It just looked like something somebody was going to wear randomly. The ones Iowa has, they look nice. The touch with the gray, with the numbers, with the white and yellow around it looks really good. The shoulder stripe I like with it. It's a unique look. It's a modern look, which I think if you're Iowa, you kind of have to go with, because you have such a traditional look with your uniforms normally that you really shouldn't change with that. I think your alternates really should do something. It's not like crazy space stuff from like 31-25 trying to play football, but something that's just a little more modern and a little bit more up to date with the look, I think goes a long way with an alternate jersey for them.
Players loved it. In fact, it's funny. I know the photographer who took pictures of it, and what's funny about it is, they had to leave their cell phones out of the shoots because they figured what they would do is, hey, they took a picture of it, and then they would accidentally send it out. They wanted the full exposure Sunday night. So, but they all seem to love it. That they love the helmets. I think, I've seen them all. I think this is the coolest throwback uniform of them all. I really do. I liked the one 2 years ago against Minnesota, all black, but it didn't pop the way this one does. So players love them. Noah Fant says they're the best thing ever. He's really into it. So I think if the players feel that way, now Kirk Ferentz, tongue in cheek, is being a smart butt about it. But he's in his 60s, and they're not for him. They're for 18-year-old kids. And
the fact he said he's ruining their recruiting by saying it had him more excited and he couldn't sleep on Saturday night was the most underrated Kirk Ferentz line. You'll probably get at a press conference here. They got actual laughs out of the journalists. A lot of the laughs you get from journalists with jokes from coaches and press conferences like that is kind of like forced, like canned laughter you get on like sitcoms from the 80s or 90s they used to have. It's just we know we're supposed to do it. There were real laughs out of that. And that was that was a really good joke for him because kind of, it shows he understands the situation, why they're doing it, and the fact that he's not a fan of it, plays into it all. It was a really good line from him.
Yeah. And Iowa does have, to me, one of the best traditional uniform sets there is anyway, but this is just different. And again, I don't care as a 44-year-old, but 20-year-olds definitely care.
And teenagers do even more than 20-year-olds.
Right.
Lisa says blitz, blitz, blitz. If you're Iowa, you're going to have to mix it in, and they've mixed it in quite a lot this year. I think for this game you're going to have to, and the key's going to be getting through on it because Penn State loves to blitz. And Iowa fans remember that from the Penn State game a few weeks ago. And they didn't always get to him. And JT was like 27-33. And he finds the open guy. He finds the check down guy. If you blitz, you got to get to him. I think if you're going to do it in the pass game, it's on your success rate on your blitzes. I think matters almost as much, if not more, than when you're doing it and if you're catching them by surprise on it this week.
You got to be careful on the boundary side.
Yep.
That's where, it's a short side of the field, but I think that's where Iowa's not their best athletes are on that side. I think they're on the strong side a little bit more. So you've got to be careful there because if you blitz from the boundary and they're open, it could be a tough spot.
Yeah, and Ryan says the defense will have to create turnovers, give good field position for the offense to have any kind of success. In any kind of game where you're a major underdog facing a team like this, you need to not just get turnovers because it eliminates possessions for the other team and gives you extra ones. It also gets them ones with no points. You have to turn them to points. If you just get turnovers and can't score off of them, it's almost like they just punted. You have to find a way to turn those into points, and when you turn them into touchdowns, even better, because that's how you end up winning a game, is that extra possession you just created, getting points off of it. Then they have to match that with one less possession coming up down the road.
Yeah. Let's see. BJ says have to avoid 3rd and long and make big play on special teams. Yeah, I agree with the 3rd and long. You have to avoid it because it's not an advantageous situation. And Iowa does have a passing game that's conducive a little bit more to longer throws. But in special teams, yes. I mean, you can't allow them to return it 50 yards, and you want to ideally force them if you kick off to keep the ball inside their 20 so that you can stop them. So.
Yeah, but a couple of 3rd down questions there. It's going to be tough because I was going to want to run the ball, and Ohio State's really good with the run defense. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we went back to the pass a little bit. You might have to pass a little bit more on 1st down, mix things up with some intermediate short passes, maybe go, I don't know, some 3 wide look and try to spread them out of the box, get fewer guys in the box, which has had some success for Iowa rushing the ball this year. But yeah, kind of the success rates determine how good a team moves the ball consistently down the field. And you want 4 yards on 1st down, have to have a good number there. And then on 2nd down, you want to gain 70% of whatever total yardage is left available. If Iowa's numbers there are really low, like in the 30s on both of those, it's going to be a hard day for the offense, I think.
And Casey brings up a not run on 3rd and long. They usually don't, but I think what they need to avoid is running straight on 1st down. 1st down is really key, and they flipped the script in the first drive last week and went completely off. I mean, they threw on 3 tight end set, and then they ran on a 3 wide receiver set. It ended up leading to a touchdown right off the bat. I mean, after the 2nd play, Minnesota calls timeout. It was like, whoa, what's this team? This isn't Iowa. That's what they have to do more of, and that is, okay, let's pass on 1st down, and if it is 3rd and 7, maybe run, because sometimes they won't be expecting if they're in nickel or dime, and if you can get one of your perimeter blockers out on a nickel back, I mean, you might be all right.
Yeah, Jared wants to know if Josie will play on Saturday. Yep, he will. In typical Josie Jewell fashion, he was not a fan of answering questions about his health, said he was fine, and kind of just grunted it off as no one's healthy this time of year. I'm going to be playing anyway. Please ask me about something else, which is typical Josie. So from that front, he's fine. He'll play. It didn't look like it was too big of an issue for him this past week. Was more of an issue, I think, the second half of the Illinois game when he first did it than from this past week. So, it's probably going to be an issue for him the rest of the year, but, I think he led the team in tackles or was 2nd. So as long as he doesn't have to raise his hands too much, I think he'll be fine.
Oh, football players.
Yeah.
All right. Wayne says they absolutely have a chance. Yeah, it takes the right combination of plays. I've seen improvements. Still fall in football. Enjoy, go Hawks. Yeah, and I think that's what all of us have to remember from time to time, because I remember, the greatest turnaround I've ever seen for this team was last year. Penn State, they gave up 600 yards. They got beat 41-14, and then they're playing a team that, the superlatives were off the charts defensively, and I picked them to get shut out. And they, scored 14 points, which was one more than, and one thing with Iowa is they will give Ohio State a fastball. This will not be an easy go to Illinois and score 60, or Purdue or somebody like that. This is going to be, Iowa will punch them in the face as hard as they can for a while. Now, can they handle it? Do they have enough gas to push through? I don't know. That's going to be a really tough challenge. But I do think Iowa will come out physical. Nathan Budges said we got to turn it into a fist fight. Yeah, they're going against better athletes and guys who are bona fide NFL caliber players. But you know what? Iowa doesn't care. Iowa doesn't feel that intimidation. The last 3 times they played them, I've been there for all 3, and they were all 3 great games. Those teams had a little bit different people. So Iowa's going to have to take advantage of some situations, but because Iowa actually was probably the better team in 9 and 10 and lost them both by a field goal.
Yep, Wayne thinks Iowa has a chance with the right combination of plays, and he's seen improvement. Yeah. And they are better than they were a few weeks ago, but they need to. It's a 2-pronged thing. They have to continue that this week to beat Ohio State, and they can't make mistakes just because of the quality opponent. You need both, and unless both show up. And even we were talking earlier, 1 or 2 mistakes might be enough. Just that's it. Get over with this team just because of how good they are and how many things they can exploit on opponents. That just speaks to the level of the quality of opponent this week, not so much to necessarily Iowa. It's that way with almost anybody Ohio State plays, unless they're facing a Bama or somebody.
Yeah, right. Bill says, Mike says, bend don't break will simply not work against a real team like this. Must blitz.
Worked against a real team like Penn State.
Yeah, bend but don't break. Really what you do is if you can force them to go the length of the field and you keep forcing them and they keep dinking, and a lot of times they get bored or they get anxious. Somebody said, you know what, I'm getting tired of this. Kevin Wilson is the most type A personality I've ever met in coaching, which says a lot. And I can see him getting anxious, going, all right, we got to hit something here. This 3rd and 3 and getting 4 yards just isn't working for him because he wants to get chunks.
Yeah. And
then you force him. And then, Iowa has maybe the best corner in the Big Ten, Josh Jackson. They have maybe one of the best pass rushers in the Big Ten in Anthony Nelson. They have the best linebacker in the Big Ten in Josie Jewell. Sometimes things happen. So you got to blitz when it's appropriate. But don't rely on it too much because this team will pick you apart with a quarterback like that.
Yeah, Iowa needs to have big plays to win this game, and they can't allow Ohio State to have any. That was part of the reason they had so much success against Penn State is they, especially in the pass game, they didn't allow them to move the ball down the field and have that 40 or 50-yard touchdown. Saquon Barkley made big plays, but that was him doing things really baby Bryce Love, and Stanford is the only running back in the country that was unique to him. If they can kind of bottle him up and make him slowly move down the field, I think it'll be you'll mark it up as a win for Iowa against Ohio State in that game, irregardless of the number of points they get. Because Ohio State is the 11th ranked passing attack in the country. They average a gazillion points. It's one of those things where you're not going to expect them to hold a team to 17 points or 10 points like they have the last couple of weeks. This is a team that's probably getting at least into the 20s, and that's when you have a good day on them. They're just that good.
Bill says, I expect to beat him through the air. I think just that's the recipe for just about every team. Iowa just has to do it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I'm talking about the deep ball so much is, you had Penn State, you had Michigan State, and to an extent you had Northwestern all load the box since they beat us through the air. And so if you're Ohio State and you have really great athletes who are cover guys, I wouldn't be surprised to see them just trot out in hand and just bring a lot of guys in the box and say, all right, Nate, let's see if you and those receivers can throw it. And until you prove that you can, we're just going to load the box, and then we'll adjust when we have to. It's worked against Iowa so far when the better teams in this league have played them.
Yeah. And Matt brings up, Iowa did hold Penn State to 21. Ohio State allowed 38. Yeah. I mean, Iowa shut it down when it got in the red zone. That was something crucial. Yeah. Iowa, a first half interception by Josie Jewell led to a touchdown. They've got to do those types of things in this game, because if it gets in the third quarter, it's a close game, and you've got a blackout, and you've got a rabid crowd of 70,000 at Kinnick, and you got a team that's believing that it can hang and it can win. Because, they won 12 games 2 years ago. They beat Michigan last year. They almost beat Penn State this year. This is not going to go in and go, shucks, poor us. I mean, they're going to go in and, fists flying. And you got a guy like, J.K. Dobbins, incredible athlete. But, he gets hit a few times by Josie Jewell. That changes people.
Yeah, it can.
I remember Melvin Gordon. I remember him coming in, and Iowa fans went after him relentlessly on the sidelines. And, he remember he told us at Media Day a couple months later, look, they were in my head, and that's why he had the worst day until the debacle.
The fans can get in your head. The physicality of the defense can get in your head, and it can wear you down. There's a bunch of different ways. When teams come into Iowa, that can all become a factor. We have Jeff and Robert, who both kind of see this as an Ohio State route and think it'll be over quick. So, I don't think they're alone in the fan base thinking that. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think they're wrong. And Quint wants to know about Brandon Snyder. Can he still get a medical redshirt? The fact he came back and played against Illinois, I think, is going to make it really hard for them to get it, because he did come back and play in a game. He was out, he came back, and now he's out again. If he would have sat out the whole year, I think that would have made it a whole lot easier for him. And it's the NCAA. You never know what can happen. But typically with the NCAA, when you're in a spot like that, when the guy comes back from the injury, that kind of ends your hopes for the medical red shirt and steps foot on the field in a game.
He's kind of stuck because his first red shirt was a traditional freshman red shirt, and so usually you don't get a second one, unless it's two medicals, and then you get a sixth year. And so in his case, he would have been struggling anyway. But playing at this time, it's just write it off. He is a junior, so does he want to be in school for 6 years anyway? That's a lot to ask of a person, let alone.
Advice to anyone to stay in college as long as you can, especially if have to add it to your student debt.
He's a smart guy too. That would be nice to get your master's, I suppose, paid for. Sam says good luck. Nate brings up, put pressure on JT. Can't let him have all day to throw. Yeah, that's true for everybody, especially this guy. Offensively, need to get Wadley and Butler in the field at the same time. They did a few plays last week. Some jet sweeps, play action, or decoy run up the ISO up the middle. Yeah, there was one play where Wadley was in the slot and they, ran Butler the opposite way. They didn't even use any kind of jet sweep action, which I thought was smart. Okay, he's on the field. What's he going to do? He's not doing anything. That's pretty much what happened.
Let me ask you this question, because James Butler injury, any hopes Iowa had of doing anything with those two guys together kind of disappeared with his injury. They did a little bit of it the first couple games. Third game, he gets hurt, so it came off the table. They weren't willing to do that with Torrin or Ivory Martin. So now you have the two of them back. Mm-hmm. Maybe there was stuff you wanted to show earlier, or maybe you were going to do things to set it up to leave yourself in a big game, and then you'd counteract off it, kind of like what Penn State did with Michigan. If you have anything interesting with Wadley in the slot, these two in the backfield, do you unveil it this week, or do you kind of hold off on that for the Wisconsin game?
I do this week. That since really you don't have a Big Ten title at stake, it would be a miracle, and don't engage in that stuff right now. Throw it all out. If okay, let's say they do upset Ohio State, but they lose at Wisconsin. In the grand scheme of things, you beat Ohio State at home, and I think people will dig that. And I think and Kirk's always been ramped up for the Blue Bloods, which is why he's had such a good record against Michigan and Penn State over the years. Not so much recently with Penn State, but certainly for a while. And Ohio State's always been the one on the top shelf that he can't even touch with a ladder. He's gotten them once. That was in 2004, and Iowa's defense was about 7 levels higher than it is right now. And that's not
kind of like that was kind of like how the Ohio State defense is playing right now. It's a different different era a little bit, but it's comparable with the talent level and the way they were dominating people. It was kind of it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, because that year they gave up 4 points to Penn State on 2 safeties. They gave up 7 to Ohio State at the end in a garbage touchdown and won 33-7. They killed Wisconsin 30-7 in Big Ten title game, or at least share of it. So that team was in a different level across the board. There's probably, but this team's got some good players, and but that's different. So
totally different. Yep.
John Lynch, hey, good trade there for Garoppolo. Probably breaking the hearts of Hawkeye Nation. Right
yeah.
now. He says, I hope they can pull it off, but at the very least, keep the game closer than Nebraska. They didn't have to hear from us.
I don't think that's going to be tough to do. I mean, that game was over. 2 possessions in.
That was like sniffing gangrene. Go, oh God, you cut the arm off. Carlene, I hope I said that right. Our offense needs to show up. It will give us a chance. Yeah, that's true. Phil says, well said with the 3 and outs. Yep. For sure, that needs to happen. Dan, if we can let the defense also play offense, might pull the upset.
Hot takes. Hot takes.
Josie Jewell was terrific running back at Decorah and high school.
So Josh Jackson spent a little bit of time at wide receiver here as a freshman. There you go.
He and Greg Maven both start off as wide receivers and switch to the other side of the ball.
So there you go. Josie Jewell on some wheel routes out of the backfield, and then you have some fade routes to Josh Jackson. Let him use that size a little bit. There's your offense. There's your game plan right there. We just won the game for him.
There you go. Let's see. Bill says several defensive line playing on Sundays. Davis, Johnson, Daniels, Carl Klug, all 3 are defensive tackles. Yeah, and you look at some of those. Now, Carl Davis was built like a defensive tackle. He's kind of like Cedric Lattimore in that regard. Same thing. Jaleel Johnson was one of probably the best defensive line recruit they've had in a long time, 4-star outside of Epineza, of course. But Daniels, 230 pounds. They didn't know if they're going to make him a fullback, a linebacker, or a defensive lineman. There he was. Carl Klug, 215 pounds. Then becomes a first-team All-Big Ten guy, and he's still with the Tennessee Titans. So they've turned those guys in. Mitch King was, and Matt Kroll were, running back, linebacker types that became defensive linemen. So they turned those guys into it. But, I think there's some that, they kind of, if they can get that body and keep them going, Jaleel Johnson being one, they're in a better spot.
Yeah, and Scott says he thinks Iowa plays big Saturday. They proved that they could against Penn State. If you're an Iowa fan and you enter a game like this where it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, or it's like Penn State or somebody else where they're coming in here and they're ranked really high and it's a big game at home and you're just confident because you don't even need that Penn State game, I think it's a legitimate argument to make, and you can sit on that field because history has shown more often than not, and it's not just like a 55 to 45% rate. Iowa, as you said, they bring their fastball. They're going to come out, with their haymakers ready to go. They might not win the game, but they're going to give it what they can, and they're a lot of the times they end up, hey, you pull off the upset like Michigan, or you end up in the Penn State game where it's a battle going into the second half, and the other team walks out the winner, but they took some shots too. If you want to have that kind of just confidence walking into a big game in Kinnick Stadium when I was the underdog like that, I think you could almost say that any time with recent history interference.
Yeah, I mean they're going to be nasty. They're going to be physical. I mean if you're not going to give them their respect, they're going to take it. And I think you look at and let's set it up for Ohio State too. I mean they're a really good team. I mean this is the type of game where if this was over at the Death Star, I'd be really
changes everything.
But I mean, they just beat number 2 Penn State. Next week they got Michigan State. This is the donut hole in the middle. Those two were at home. This one's on the road. They haven't played Iowa for a long time. It's not like Iowa is big in their eyes. But I think that's kind of why Urban Meyer is trying to keep them focused. That this isn't a normal opponent. This is an opponent that will punch you really hard, for 4 quarters. You might win, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a fun one. So I think that's why he wants to make sure that they're up to speed because, again, the 13 game, that Iowa really took it to them, and I remember Jake Doozy catching an 85-yard touchdown from, where he outran the defensive back for the last 50 yards, which was amazing. I think it was Bradley Roby, first-round draft pick, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's too bad Doozy's knee went to pot because he would have been really good. So.
Yeah, Bill wants to know if there's any word about Brian Ferentz's meeting with Gary Barta today. Nothing beyond what's been said by the head coach that it's happening. That there's going to be a report that comes out of it that Gary Barta is going to pass on to the Big Ten. And then from there, there's going to be a decision made on, if there's going to be a fine, a suspension, anything else. And they came out today, Iowa, and said, "Hey, it was inappropriate. Whatever comes out of this from a disciplinary standpoint, that they're fine with it. It'll happen, and you won't kind of hear boo out of them on it." It was kind of a preemptive response from Kirk about it, simply because he won't talk to the media again about it until after the game on Saturday. So I totally get why he said it the way he did. And like with everything else on how he's handled it, he went about it the right way. I mean, he said it's been inappropriate the whole way. They would look into it, and he kind of got in front of the ball here on this one. Said if there's punishment, we're fine with it, and we'll just take it and move on and learn from it.
Yeah, it could be a letter of admonishment. Yeah. It could be an apology. It could be a fine. It could be a suspension. It's one of those things. And so I anticipate something. I don't anticipate, hey, it's over. It could very well be just, hey, I realize that my actions were inappropriate, and I'll vow to do better and move on. There's nothing wrong with that either. So Mike says you seem to forget the emotion part. If they don't have it, we could be a real surprise to them. Yeah, no, I mean that's the truth. Iowa will be emotional for this game. Will Ohio State match it? We'll find out.
Falls into the potential of a trap game. Yeah. A letdown game, probably.
For Ohio State.
For Ohio State, that's what I was talking about. Yeah. Come out, that game with Penn State had been circled on everyone's calendar in college football since the schedule came out. They won it in an amazing comeback fashion. You see teams in that spot kind of throw a dud the next week a little bit, especially when it's on the road.
Right.
So, that's definitely a possibility. I saw some tweet from some Ohio State reporters this afternoon with Urban making threats to his team that if he even sensed a letdown, that would be a nuclear meltdown or something like that. So he's doing the coach response to it for that. But, I think it's definitely in play. You can't just dismiss it just because it happens too often in football for you to just kind of move on from it.
I'm sure that they're looking at it going, you know what, Michigan went in there and Iowa boxed their ears last year. Penn State was one play away from losing that game too. This is not going to be easy. So I'm sure they're going to think about that, but still, this is not a regularly played series anymore, unfortunately. So it's, anybody who was on the field that day in Columbus, I don't know that anybody's going to be around. That was 5 years ago, because even the guys like Jewell and Budgeta,
they were on the road.
They wouldn't even travel. So they were watching it at home on the TVs.
Yeah. This has been the debate on what the defense should do. Bill sides it with the blitz side, and Josh is back on typical Iowa D side with long drives. As we've said multiple times in here, we're both kind of on the bend but don't break while mixing in some of the blitz side. And Wayne brings up the letdown, which we just kind of talked about on there. And Scott brings up could be a big game and spot for Amir Smith-Marset. Yes. We've been talking about the deep ball and how that's probably the best thing for Iowa if they're going to have a shot offensively here. And he's a guy that they like going to as a wide receiver on that. When he comes in, that's part of the reason he's in there. Just for that, I don't even know how he dropped the ball last week. It hit his face mask, went between his hands, could have been a touchdown. At a minimum, would have been a 45, 50-yard play. He's consistently shown the ability to get deep. I think they're going to take shots deep. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a game where Brian takes a shot deep on the first play. We've seen that a couple times this year out of him as an underdog, just try to come out and hit a haymaker. Yeah. Maybe you can get him on the canvas with that first shot and get a touchdown there. But, I think Amir Smith-Marset and Noah Fant are the two guys on that deep play that you have to look at on there, because those are the guys they go to the most. Noah leads the team in touchdowns, and a lot of his have been on those deep passes, and they like looking at Amir there. If they could connect to those two guys, if they can combine with receptions for them on deep passes, at least 3 in this game, I think that's really good for Iowa. Anything below it is very worrisome for the offense, and anything above it, I think, could give you a really good shot to get the points you need to play with Ohio State in the fourth quarter and have a chance at the upset. Yeah,
I look at the other two. I think easily can sneak past people.
Yes.
Vandenberg is not quite as fast as he used to be. I think he's still working on that foot. I think he's got a ways to go, but he's still a threat. But they got to catch the ball too. And with 5 drops, I think it was last week, you can have 1 or less, and it better be 2nd and 5 and a drop in the flat that would have gone for 1 yard.
Yeah,
that might be the only drop you're allowed to have in this game. And Wadley, maybe Wadley needs to go deep too.
They ran plays
Iowa State play.
From last year out of the backfield. That's one of my talk all you want about Greg Davis. One of my favorite plays I saw last year was the kind of stutter go they had from him out of the backfield last year. Some sort of deep route for him out of the backfield they haven't shown yet. if you're saving stuff, this could be a time to use it here because that's big. I mean, he's had big pass plays, but they've all been on dump-off routes or something like that. It's not been a design play where he's been somebody who's looking to run down the field. I actually like that idea.
Yeah. Right. John says they probably don't hang. Well, that's true. I'm not going to pick Iowa to win, but I could also see them fighting. And it's probably one of those games where if they don't win, but they play well or play hard, try not to give that big hard of a time. Because this is a team that's really, really good. So Dwayne says go Hawks. Todd brings up that they hung with Penn State. That is true. Josh, regardless of what happens Saturday, how can you not be optimistic about the future on offense and defense, especially when Brian gets a little more experience on play calling and these players execute on the plays that are right there? I think it's the beginning of something great, even if it's a little frustrating at this time.
That sums it up really well, I think, for a big picture approach.
I know people want to have a lot of angst right now, and I can understand that. But it is a growing process. You do have a young quarterback. You still have young tackles, young wide receivers who make mistakes, and still two tight ends who are starters. One's a true sophomore, the other's a redshirt freshman, and you've got a couple other behind them who are pretty young.
Yeah, a lot of youth on defense too.
So outside a linebacker and interior offensive line, you're really young. Now you might have to replace a corner next year that you didn't expect.
But, You'll take that trade-off, though, I think, for the kind of year Josh Jackson said. Yeah, Pro Football Focus has him as a first-round draft pick in the first mock draft that came out today, which was surprising for me. But kid's got size. Everybody in the NFL loves size. He's athletic. I'll have a big story later this week kind of on Josh and his transformation from a guy who was a reserve who really didn't play much last year until he got towards the end of the season with injuries to becoming a legitimate All-American candidate.
It's really impressive because 2 years ago he was at times the nickel corner, times the dime corner, but then coming into 16, Manny Rugamba beat him out.
Yeah,
he was the sixth, corner, and then, or I said defensive back, the dime, and then he finally worked himself into one start. But he realized he needed to grow up in the offseason and get better, and he did. And man, I mean, the other day, he had 4 breakups, and they were all impressive. I mean, he was beating the receiver to the ball. Really shocked me, if nothing else, that Minnesota didn't put Tyler Johnson more on Rugamba. He did early, and then they kind of slid him back to another spot. They needed to get away from him.
The only success Tyler had was going against Manny. And not so much a knock on Manny as it was he just couldn't do anything on Josh. If I'm an opponent and I wasn't going to flip Josh with your top receiver, I would make that move just every time. Just why make life harder for yourself than it needs to be? People have gone at him all year. He leads the nation in pass breakups. You're not getting much on him. Go the other way. I didn't think they'd have a Desmond King shutdown corner this year, but they got one, and it's him, and it's really impressive.
It is really impressive. So Joan says Hawk still hanging from Iowa. The punting game, Bill. Yes, punting game's got to get better.
Has not been great. Yeah.
They BJ says
same thing.
Need to punt better. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one more first down. You play bend but don't break. You need a great punt game because instead of getting the ball at their own 40, you're making them get it at the 30. Make them go 70 yards instead of 60. And if they continue to ding their way down the field, they're going to get frustrated. Kevin Wilson definitely will get frustrated.
Yeah. Kitty thinks they're going to lose, but still's going to root for the team. And then back in our conversation about NCAA and you never know with medical redshirts or anything, he says Drew Ott. I wasn't here at the time, but from Iowa State, from where I was sitting, it looked like they had no shot at it. And I was kind of surprised Iowa and Kirk were so surprised that it didn't happen off the bat.
Well,
that was just my view from the outside with the way the NCAA typically goes. And it was everything we were talking about, guys coming back, the way everything I was quotes talking about the injury. I was surprised they thought they had a shot at it.
Yeah, I wrote way too many stories about it at the time. And it was really challenging because they were trying to count more of the plays that he was involved in. And after he had a horrific, I mean, it was worse than James Butler, dislocated elbow. It was disgusting. And then he came back, and then, then he tore his ACL in the 6th game, and you kind of figure, okay, that's done. But then they were trying to say, well, majority of snaps, then you're stretching out your season to 14 games, so bottom line, they didn't get it, so you can't rely on them. Matt Vandenberg, they didn't get it.
Yeah.
So
and he also didn't come back and play.
Bill says he doesn't think the crowd size and noise is going to bother them that much. They're used to playing in front of 104. Yeah.
Yes and no.
It's a different crowd. I mean, that is an incredible place to watch football. No doubt about it. It's louder there, but and they've been to Nebraska, but they shut those fans up pretty quick. The sidelines are different here. It really is.
Sidelines are different. Go up and Google the story I wrote on that earlier this season for that, but also having 104,000 cheering for you versus I don't even care Kinnick or anywhere else in the Big Ten against you is totally different because the offense is going to hear noise when they wouldn't otherwise, and so that's going to change it. And it's the whole dynamic of being on the road and you versus them. Some coaches and players like being on the road more because it's kind of the bunker mentality of you take it on the world. Some don't, but it is a little different. But yeah, it would impact them coming here less than it would your random like MAC team like Wyoming coming here for certain. But there is still an impact kind of on that. And Josh wonders if there's anything Brian's been kind of hiding the last few weeks to say. We kind of touched on that a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. Nobody chose the whole playbook, week one of the first half of the season. They'd save something for the big games or November just because you never know where your team's going to be. No one saw Iowa was undefeated in November a couple of years ago. And if you don't save a few things, they might not go through that regular season undefeated too.
Right. So. Exactly. Roy says Iowa could win the game. It's all good karma. Sound level is up high. Don't sit on fat rich butts up loud all the time. It's middle afternoon game, so nobody should be sleeping like it was an 11. So Chad says, I got to say, we are a big factor. We need to pack Kinnick to the rafters and make Ohio State use all their timeouts early. No fair weather fans. No, I don't disagree at all. Darren says open up the offensive blitz. Okay. Daniel, I see the Buckeyes lose this match with plenty of penalties and many more mistakes. That's one thing about Ohio State is they are low. I think they're number one in most penalty yards allowed per game.
Not 71. A stat you want to lead.
Yeah, so, I mean, you make some mistakes here, it can hurt your chances. So bad temper because of their mistakes on Iowa Go Hawks. Bill says Matt Vandenberg has not had the season that he or any of us hoped he would. Yeah, I think he's struggled a little bit. He's dropped a couple of passes, which I think are inexplicable for him. He wasn't quite there last year, and I don't think he has quite the speed. But he's still a very strong leader, and he's providing that intangible, which I think is very much overlooked. You want to just look at on-field production. So.
Yeah, and I'm so not convinced that his foot's not part of this because multiple breaks can be. Some guys, they never get the speed back from it. Some of it takes a long time for it to happen. We're talking like maybe 18 months or 2 years.
Right.
And Matt and I was with the eligibility window. He didn't have that time. He had one season for it. And so, it hasn't been what he hoped for. But I think if you're Iowa or a fan, you're glad he's there because you had nobody else. You needed him, and he still has been productive. He just hasn't been the receiver. You thought he would be a part of that. Is kind of his hands are tied on that a little bit with all the foot stuff.
Yeah, he's gotten a couple of pretty good catches there. So last one here, Terry says use AJ a lot. Well, he's been playing a lot.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot. He's been getting a lot of snaps. He's been getting towards the quarterback, close to making disruptions a lot. I wrote during the Penn State week they needed him to have a big game. I think you could say the same thing. Again here, and not just him, but with Anthony Nelson and anybody else they're sending in and a chance to make a pass rush and kind of control the edge because Minnesota did have some success getting outside on jet sweeps or just pitches or plays outside. Ohio State has better athletes. They'll see that film. They'll try to do the same thing. Iowa's going to have to kind of shore that up a little bit this week.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for chiming in with your comments and your questions. We appreciate it. We'll be writing quite a few stories here over the next few days, and our next Facebook Live Saturday early afternoon from Kinnick Stadium.
Yes, have a happy Halloween, everybody. Have fun trick-or-treating.